women are actually over-mentored but under-sponsored, which means there is actually support and there are structures and people who want to support women in growth and their career path towards leadership. But what is still missing is the door opening for opportunities. So making sure somebody gets to play the role that they're interested in or gets the next leadership position.
When it comes to fostering diversity, equity, inclusion in the tech industry, breaking barriers and driving sustainable progress isn't always easy. Yet there are trailblazers who are rewriting the playbook and creating pathways for underrepresented talent to thrive. In today's episode, I'm thrilled to welcome Susanne Kirndorfer, former head of Diversity, Equity and Inclusion Europe at ThoughtWorks. With her background in applied linguistics and cultural studies, Susanne has spent the last 5 years navigating the tech industry, addressing systemic biases and championing inclusion for women in leadership. She shares her insights on mentorship versus sponsorship, strategies for equitable workplace cultures, and why inclusion must be a shared responsibility for lasting impact. This conversation with Susanne was incredibly enlightening. Her passion for creating meaningful change, coupled with her practical advice for leaders, makes this a must listen for anyone committed to advancing diversity, equity, inclusion in their organisation. Before we dive in, a quick ask. If you're enjoying these conversations and want to keep the DEI dialogues alive, please subscribe to the podcast, leave a review and share this episode with your network. Your support helps us bring you more impactful stories like Susanne's. Now, let's jump into my conversation with Susanne Kirndorfer. Enjoy. Hi, Susanne.
Hi, Natasha.
Welcome to the All Inclusive Podcast. I'm so happy to have you.
Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to this podcast.
Yeah, me too. It's going to be a great conversation. I just know it. So let's get started. Tell our listeners a little bit more about yourself, your journey into DEI leadership.
Yeah, hi. So my name is Susanne. I live in Munich, Germany. And the past, 5 years, I have been working in different roles in diversity, equity, and inclusion within the technology industry. Originally, I actually studied applied linguistics and cultural studies. And when entering the job market years ago, I didn't even know that there is something like a job in diversity, equity, inclusion. Maybe it was also not even something that existed back then. So there was not something that I really knew as a goal that I want to do. So I started working in different roles and also industries. I worked for a while in research and then joined ThoughtWorks first as a community manager, where I got voluntarily involved in diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. I joined our DI community. I got involved in employee resource groups and got the opportunity to do trainings and also give trainings around the topic of DI. And later on, there was the role of the head of DI for Germany was open, and I got the opportunity to take it. I think what is kind of like the straight thread or line through my different career paths is that within cultural studies, you look very often at things from an outer perspective. For example, at your language or literature in your first language, which in my case is German, and try to take different perspectives. And I think this kind of thinking is still helpful for me today in my job as DI expert manager.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think when we talk about, especially when we talk about inclusion as well, and how do we create that inclusive environment? For me, when I think about inclusion, it is making sure that we can take into consideration everyone's background, experience, and perspective. So I totally agree. I think being able to look outward and not only understand what your own perspective is, but also validate and give space for others as well. It's definitely a skill set. I think it's as I've gotten older, I feel like I appreciate that now, and I acknowledge it, and I'm more intentional about it. But I think from when I was younger, it's not something that is always specifically taught when we're younger. And actually, it's funny that you do say that, because we literally just went to our daughter's parents' evening, and that's one of the things that her teacher had said, is that Robin's doing great at school, which is good, academically, socially she's good, but where she knows the answer, she's really quick, and when they're in group activities, she just wants to get it out straight away, and it's teaching her to kind of just take a step back and giving space for others, which is and that's why for me, I've realized that it is definitely a skill set, and it's one that it's so important to teach, I think, especially when we're looking at inclusion. So looking back on your experience and your journey, was there like a pivotal moment for you that really solidified that this is the right thing for me? Like, I'm in the right place, I'm in the right role when it comes to diversity, equity, inclusion?
Mm, I don't think that there was this one kind of moment, but I think I've always been interested in social structures and change processes within society. And when growing up, this was often more about this feeling that something didn't feel right or unjust or unfair, maybe something I witnessed or read about, and I didn't have the right words for it, or even I didn't even know if this is true or was just a feeling. And when I started to learn more about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and I learned about like these systems of oppression that are rooted within our society, and finally could put things into word and understand better, I got very passionate about the topic. And definitely when I started working in general and then moving through different organizations and industries, I could see that it definitely makes a change when we set goals for inclusion, when we set goals how we want to live within a community, and set goals, for example, for women in leadership. And this is actually changing something. And that made me like really move forward with this, that with this we can actually make a change and change things for at least a few people.
Definitely. So, I mean, you've worked within the tech industry, and you touched on it, women in leadership as well. In particular, I think there is, we see it time and time again, and we know statistics as well, that women do continue to face significant challenges in being able to excel in the tech industry. So with your experience with the work that you've been doing, what do you see are kind of a couple of the key barriers that are preventing women from really being able to thrive and excel and kind of move up the ladder in that leadership role?
Yeah, thank you. That's correct. So I think that the data, like in the UK, it's just 24% of women in tech-facing roles. In Germany, it's even less. I think it's even below 20%. And many of these reasons or barriers are similar to what we see also in other industries, what we also see in general for women, like climbing up a ladder. So there's still a lot of bias and stereotypes. There is a lack of role models. Mentors and sponsorship. There is not equal access to career opportunities, and not equal pay, and yeah, still a lot of harassment. I think what is often quite particular to technology is that it starts very early on, and these biases are very deeply rooted in also educational systems. The exposure for young boys and men towards technology and computers is much higher than for young girls and women. There is a lot of stereotypes around that girls can't do maths, that they are not interested in technology, that technology jobs are very lonesome, and and women are very social skilled people, and men are actually not. So I don't think even this is positive for men. And also technology jobs are very often highly communicative jobs. So they're very deeply rooted stereotypes, and starts very early before women are even entering the job market.
I totally see that, and I think there has been, and you can say otherwise, but I do think that there's been a lot more of an emphasis in trying to open up those opportunities and open the exposure for women when it comes to kind of tech. So we've got a number of educational institutes now are opening up programs for STEM to really try and get young people, both boys and girls, open to the different career paths and really just level out that playing field. But as you do say, it is deep rooted stereotypes, so it's not going to happen overnight. What do you think over the recent years? Do you think there has been somewhat of a shift? I know I talked about the STEM programs, but in other areas, do you feel like we've shifted a little bit outside of those stereotypes? We're moving towards more equity when it comes to roles within kind of the tech industry.
Yes and no. So I think it's still going quite slow sometimes, and especially gender stereotypes are very fixed in our thinking and in our society patterns. Especially, but with remote work, we have seen some changes. That there is more accessibility now for jobs, also for women who still often have, for example, the major care responsibilities. And there is also increased awareness for diversity, equity, and inclusion. So there's much more focus on at least trying to create more equal opportunities, more visibility for women leaders who then function also as role models. And also, as you mentioned, there is many programs right now and also career networks today where women have access to. What we shouldn't forget with the opportunities for remote work comes also that working from home makes the barrier between like private life and work life much more blurry, and especially when having a lot of care responsibilities, this can easily lead to much more mental load and then burnout, than when we can separate that better. So this is also where we have to be careful.
Definitely. I think, what would you say are some strategies? What's been effective in trying to alleviate that?
I think this is with all spaces that we have to facilitate them. So what I always say is when we bring people together, maybe in a workplace, maybe in an office, or also in a remote kind of office, a space, we always have kind of a community. And when we want to create it inclusive and fair for people, we have to facilitate it in a certain way. This is not just happening on its own. Oh, it might be, but then it's not going into the ways that we want to have, and probably or maybe not into inclusive directions. So we definitely have to have a role or people who kind of facilitate also these spaces and make sure that also like times are strictly set, that work days are maybe ending, and to implement structures for this.
So for you, have you ever felt like where the lines have been blurred? So in your role, was you working remotely partly, or was it kind of like a hybrid situation? Did you feel like that you were blurring the lines with like your social and your own responsibilities as well as work commitments?
Yeah, definitely. And I think this is often also about myself because, it's easy to just continue working and working. So I think what for me personally is also helpful is just, I don't know, signing up for a sports class directly after work, or like having something in place where I know now it's enough, I need to stop, and I can continue the next day. I think also in the past years, like with the beginning of the pandemic, this was very new to all of us. I think most of us got a bit better with that over the years because, yeah, we also got training in this, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think during the pandemic, it was because we were all stuck at home, so it was easier to just blend everything together and not take out that time for ourselves. And I asked the question just because I think when we have these conversations and we're talking about creating inclusive cultures and equity and gender parity, I think yes, the onus is on an organisation to facilitate that and make sure that we can do everything that we can for the employees that are coming through the doors. But also at the same time, it's us as individuals. We are still want to make sure that we can do what for ourselves as much as possible to make sure that we're leading a healthy lifestyle when it comes to work, and making sure that we're finding that right balance. So it's always, I think it's always good to hear from leaders like yourself, like what are the techniques that work for you as well, because it's that role model piece, I think, as well, like which I
Yeah.
think we touched on it, because if you've got more senior leaders really role modeling the behaviors that we want to see, in turn others will hopefully follow suit. And I know we talk
Yeah.
about it a lot in DEI, is it's kind of like that top down effect. So it's great that you've been able to find things that work for you. In your experience, like, we do, when we're talking about women in tech and hiring, we've touched on kind of there's biases. For specifically when we're looking at hiring, especially women, and we're going for those roles, what do you think is the most significant bias out there? Like, what's the main one when you're looking at going into the tech industry, and wanting to get hired? What's a key bias that you have seen come up time and time again?
I think it's very often that women are not as technical. So even when they made their career into tech, it's often that they're more seen as designers, making things beautiful, creating the social environment. So there is still a lot of stereotype that the women on the team are responsible for making the team feel good, organizing the team socials and so on. So I think this is still a stereotype that is quite fixed there. And I also think that there's this stereotype of that women who are in tech are kind of nerdy, or I don't know. So this depends a bit on the organizations. I think when there are organizations who really try to have goals around inclusion and take care about visibility for women, this gets much better. And I think there is also this stereotype when women come into leadership roles that this is mainly because you want to have more women in leadership roles and not because they're skilled enough. So I think these are a lot of things that are still quite hard there.
It's like that tick box exercise, isn't it? It's just like, all right, we need more women, let's just hire more women.
Yeah.
And I think that's,
What I don't think is true in the most cases, but yeah.
yeah, I think, I mean, I would like to think also that organizations aren't just simply hiring women in tech because they need to meet a quota. I feel like we are trying to do and review everything based on everyone's skill set and experience and whether they're going to be the right fit. And if they are a woman, that's great. I think the key thing is it's being able to make sure that you can open up that door, so to ensure that women know about that role and they feel confident to apply for it, versus whether they're just because they're a woman they're going to get the role. And like you said, it's that culture piece. So if the organization set policies, has been very clear on this is the culture, this is how we work, try to alleviate those biases with, oh, women are just here to do all the social stuff and all the airy fairy stuff, I think it will definitely help. You've touched on our conversation about mentorship, and like role modeling. Why do you feel that that's so important when it comes to trying to get more women in tech?
Oh, this is an important question. Thank you. So, as I'm working in an international environment and where most people don't have English as first language, I usually start to explain the difference between mentor and sponsorship. And so the difference here is that a sponsor is not just someone who supports you in learning more about craft skills, can share leadership advice. The role of a sponsor is to act as a door opener, to mention, for example, your names in front of others, highlight your strengths, and can open up with that opportunities for you, for next steps on your roles, leadership roles, maybe. And I read that women are actually over-mentored but under-sponsored, which means there is actually support, and there are structures and people who want to support women in growth and their career path towards leadership. But what is still missing is the door opening for opportunities. So making sure somebody gets to play the role that they're interested in or gets the next leadership position. And I don't have real data for that, but I could imagine that it looks similar to other marginalized groups. But coming back to your question, so yes, I think this is really important, because I think with like mentor sponsorship programs, we can first create more role models and then open the path to more diverse leadership, and with this even more role models, and this can reduce attrition because women feel more welcome, included, and have clear career paths in an organization, and this can also build more equity.
Mm. And what's your experience in kind of setting up these sorts of programs?
What I think is often important, that there is a level of trust, so that you also, like, all these inclusion structures are in place also with that, so that you can really open up to someone. And what I see sometimes is that when once a mentor sponsorship is running quite well, we stay to it because we like it, we enjoy it. Same as for sponsors as for sponsees. But when we want to diversify these programs and also take care that people who might not have yet all the social privilege other people might have, it's very important that we change that after a few months, after a few years. So also an advice for mentors or sponsors, like, look regularly at the people you are mentoring or sponsoring. Are they actually coming from a diverse background? Are they all looking the same? Or, like, is this a long-term relationship? Maybe they can move on to somebody else, and there are other people within your organization who could you lend your privilege and knowledge to.
It's kind of a little bit of like that similarity bias sometimes when it comes to mentorship and sponsorship. You do
Yeah.
find that people go into it with, of course, good intentions, but you can quite easily slip into only sponsoring people that you've got similarities with, which isn't all it's not going to be the best thing. So I think that's a really good point to make, is actually make sure that you're reviewing like all of the people that you are sponsoring. Do they all look the same? Do they have some differences amongst them? Because it's not only going to be beneficial for you as the person who's sponsoring, but also for the one that's receiving your sponsorship. They're going to be able to get a better opportunity through what you're doing, kind of vice versa, I think. When you're looking at leaders and allies for women as well, I think that also plays a bit of a role in terms of how we can really move those numbers upwards when it gets to women in tech. So what do you think is the best way to involve leaders more into these efforts when we're talking about kind of trying to move that needle and get more women in tech?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So in my trainings, I always say inclusion is everyone's responsibility. So it's a bottom up and top down approach. It just works when everybody's contributing to it. But you're totally right. So when we don't have the buy-in from leadership and not leaders who are leading by example, it will not work, because or it's hard that things are working because we don't have the buy-in for decisions, and probably also no budget. So this is quite important. And I think things is that we can do is get accountability and create accountability to set clear expectations. So what I said, lead by example, get involved in initiatives, get involved in employee resource groups, have specific metrics for diversity, equity, inclusion, engagement, for example, for promotion processes, have trainings offered for allies and also for leaders so they can continue their journey, and maybe for allies also give them some budget that they can attend this training. What from a DI management perspective is also important, communicate things openly and transparent when you have achieved something, so that people really see that, yeah, there is something they can contribute to.
Mm. And for you, like with accountability, you've given some examples. How do you tackle kind of that pushback though? Because I know that there's always one there's always one that will be like, oh well, actually, like, why do we need to do this? Like, or just not always going to be on the same page. What is a good technique to combat that?
Yeah, first of all, I think if somebody really does not want to engage, it's that the question, is it the right person to have in a role like that? Because this has to be driven also by passion. Um, and we also have to accept sometimes, I don't know, why does somebody not want to do that? There are certain barriers that we understand because people have just a certain time, and these things are, at least today, mostly still voluntarily. So they don't get paid. However, I think, yes, for leaders, this is very important because you go by example, and you set these expectations and examples. So I think, yeah, if you want to get certain career steps, implement this in your processes, that that you need to maybe contribute to diversity, equity, inclusion, or attend certain trainings over the years. Have also anti-bias training, that people get regularly trained on that and set clear expectations.
And I mean, overall, it's going to make their team better, right? And I
Yeah.
think everyone enters work wanting to, I'd hope anyway, goes to work wanting to do well. And especially as a manager, as a senior leader, as somebody who's leading a team, you want everyone in your team to be successful. You want to get great outcomes for your business. And ensuring that you've got diverse perspectives in the room. Only breeds more innovation and more productivity, better results. So I think if you're getting pushback on leaders that are from I guess a moral perspective, aren't really getting it, don't really understand why does this even matter. um I always find that actually when you bring it down to the numbers and the results, um, that's also one way to kind of swing the vote, I guess. But you also need to know when to cut your losses, and actually sometimes when there is significant pushback, it's just like, is that individual the right person for the job? Um, so sustaining progress in DEI overall can be quite difficult. And with all initiatives and programs, they sometimes it's going to take a long process, and we've talked about that deep rooted biases. There's systemic barriers in place that are preventing people from underrepresented groups, not just women, from being able to excel. And it's not going to happen overnight that the floodgates are going to open for us. So what would you say, or what do you think is an important factor to ensure that there is sustainable progress when it comes to this type of work?
First thing that I always say is try to track your data. Um, I know this is not possible for all marginalized groups in all countries because there is data security restrictions and so on. But if we stay with the example for gender, this is very often possible. So try to get the data. Often I get asked, what can we do to get actually more women into our organization? And then I ask, how many women do you have, for example, in tech? And most companies don't know. And with that, we also have the challenge when we don't know that we don't know where to start from. And when we started initiatives, that we cannot see if we made progress or not. And also convincing leadership is a bit easier when we say, hey, actually, this initiative has made our numbers much better. So maybe we can get more budget for this, for example. So I think tracking data over time is a key factor that we have to do. Um, then like we also have to say that it's everyone's responsibility, as we just said, for leaders, allies, everyone at company. But what we also have to see, this is not just a job for a DI manager, for HR, or for a recruiting team. DI actually shouldn't be an add-on. It should be integrated in all parts of an organization to be actually successful and to create real impact. It's overall very important to create awareness for the topic. Diversity, equity, inclusion has a lot to do with continuous self-reflection. So we also have to take care that there is the opportunity to get this awareness and to have the opportunity for the self-reflection.
Mm.
And something else that we should keep in mind is we all make mistakes. It's kind of a journey, which doesn't mean that it's okay to be intolerant, but we also have to accept that people are on different parts of this journey, and at some point, we all are continuing learning opportunities.
Yeah, I mean, we're living in an evolving world, right? Things are
Yeah.
always changing, and I think it's you make a good point. Like, we're always going to have to keep evaluating. You're going to have to take a step out and do that self reflection, at given any given point, because things are always changing, and you want to make sure that our we can change our minds. What's the word? I've lost the word from my mind, but we're all human beings. We do make mistakes and we can change our mind. Maybe 2 years from now, I might have a completely different viewpoint on this particular subject and go completely the opposite way. But if we stop and just reflect on that, our reasonings behind that, and I think it's just always going to be important to make sure that we're all staying on track and we're on the right path. Um, I mean, Susanne, I've thoroughly enjoyed our conversation today. Like, I think you've given us some really great nuggets to take away from and to really think about when we're talking about women in tech and talking about inclusive environments, especially as well. So, looking ahead to the future, before we close out, what gives you hope for the future when it comes to women in tech? What are you looking forward to seeing?
So we definitely do see change. As I said before, for me, it's not going fast enough. Um, but definitely things are changing. People get more involved. There's much more focus today on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And something that I want to mention here is that I don't know if it's always a good thing, but maybe it will have a good impact. We should do all of this because it's the right thing to do, but always also we see a major need on the job market. So if we in the future want businesses to grow, we have to focus much more on inclusion. So in the past decades, women have been broadly excluded from the job market, but with growing shortage of skilled workers in certain industries or for certain job roles, this is not just a decision whether we want to be more inclusive or not. I think it's a crucial business need for organizations if they want to continue being successful.
Definitely. Well, here's hoping that, that all of that happens. I think it's so important, and yeah, it's definitely going to be a crucial factor in order for all businesses to grow and become successful. But Susanne, thank you so much again for coming in and having a fantastic conversation with me. For our listeners, how best can they connect with you if they want to learn a little bit more about you and your work?
They can connect with me via LinkedIn. Just look for my name and just send me a text or ping me. I'm happy to get your messages and answer them.
Oh, perfect. Well, thank you once again, Susanne, for joining me on the show. And for our listeners, do make sure you hit up Susanne for any additional questions that you've got, and follow her on LinkedIn. She's doing amazing work, and I can't wait to see what more great stuff she's got in store for the next coming years. So thanks again, everyone.